Welcome in. Good to see you this morning. I see that we have a couple of people who are members of Bloom Watercolor Club here. Welcome. Good to see you guys. So I'm so excited. Today we're going to be painting a pink Icelandic poppy in watercolor. So here's the one I did last night after the kids went to sleep, just because I was like, I should probably do a run through. But our goal today for this class is to really capture that look of sort of like the crinkled, almost like wrinkled linen texture to these petals. And I would say somehow this painting is easy and complicated. I think that no matter what skill level you are at, I think you'll be able to create something that you love, that you're proud of. So I'm really looking forward to this one today. So we're going to go slowly, really kind of build our details intentionally and with a lot of thought. So before I get started, go ahead and just let me know in the chat where you're from. Hello, Amber from Oxfordshire. Oxfordshire, is it, or Shire? Oxfordshire sounds like the more British way to say it. But let me know where you guys are watching from. Let me know if you are painting with me in real time or if you are going to watch and then paint later. And of course, I always love to hear any of your comments. I have my computer open over here so I can see as I go. And then I guess one last thing I'll mention. So in 4 days, I am going to open the doors to Bloom Watercolor Club, which is my watercolor art membership. So I've only ever opened the doors one time back in October, and we have a little over 100 ladies, all girls in there, but we have over 100 people in there. It's such an amazing, kind, and encouraging community. So if you are looking for more in-depth watercolor tutorials, I have over like 50 hours of content over there, and I would love for you to join. So in 4 days, the doors are going to open. I have a link below. Just click that link, get on the wait list, and I'll let you know more information. So the doors will be open for just 4 days, and I'm opening it in 4 days. So links below, and I think I popped it in the chat as well. So seeing everybody, I have somebody from the Philippines, Esther from the Philippines. Aw, so good to see you guys. New York, Kingston, New York, Francesca. Lancaster, California, Barb. Sam is in Yorkshire. Good to see you guys. Okay, well, I'm going to switch to overhead view and we will get started. So, okay, so let's make sure that everything is, you guys can see everything, right? And you guys can hear everything, right? Let me know how the audio sounds. Let me know if you can hear or if you can see everything okay. And I'm going to talk through some supplies and we will get started. So I sketched out my painting ahead of time, or I sketched out my drawing ahead of time. And if you haven't done that, there's a link below where you can get that sketch. I want you to sketch it out first. Just pause this video. It's not going to go anywhere. Just pause it, sketch it out. And then we're going to just jump right into painting today after I talk through some supplies. So I have 2 size 6 round brushes and then 1 small brush, I think a size 1. And I'm going to pull my computer over real quick so I can see what you guys are saying. Okay, and then I'm going to use a few different colors today. So I'm going to use alizarin crimson. I'm going to use a little bit of Indian yellow, a little bit of lemon yellow, some sap green, and what's that one called? Ultramarine blue. And I'm going to just turn on my light here. Hopefully it's not too glaring here, but I just want to make sure you can see all the colors really well as I'm working. What else? Okay, so I have a size 9x9 cold press watercolor paper. You can see that I just used some regular masking tape. Sometimes I'll work on a block. You don't actually need to tape it down, but if you want to, I would just use masking tape. And I think that that's all. I'll just have a paper towel here. I got some water and I think we're ready to get going. So I'm going to start with my size 6 round brush. And I'm going to, over here, actually I'll do it in this middle one. I'm going to get some lemon yellow mixed with a little bit of sap green. And I want this color to be kind of like the color of olive oil. So more yellow, but it has kind of that slightly greenish color in it as well. A little more watery than olive oil though. Not quite as thick as olive oil. And we're going to start with the very center of our painting. So go ahead and just drop this color here in the very center. And then I'm going to use my other brush, just wet it a little bit, and then I'm going to smooth that color out. Just smooth it outwards just a little bit. And we're kind of just moving it outwards in a ring. So you'll notice in the sketch we kind of have an inner, I'll call it a circle. It's not a circle, but a center, we'll call it whatever, a circle, a lumpy circle. And around that there's an even lumpier circle. And then around that is a much lumpier circle that's a larger ring, okay? So this very center here is, we're calling that the pistil. That's the pistil of the flower. And then the area just around it is the stamen. So what I'm trying to think here is making the center more of that true, kind of more intense yellow-green color, and then it kind of fades as we fade out. We're going to let that dry, come back to it. We're going to kind of work in layers, like going from the center to the petals, center to the petals. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get some alizarin crimson over here, give it some space here, and then some lemon yellow. And so lemon yellow and alizarin crimson are going to be the two colors that are kind of the base of the petals, is a mix of lemon yellow and alizarin crimson. And we're going to have them kind of meeting in the middle and then being alone every now and then. So I'm going to get a mix here of both of them, very watery. And what we're going to do is we're going to start with this petal over here on the left side. So I'll go ahead and start over here at the top. And what I'm going to try and think about is going between yellow, pink, or alizarin crimson, and then a mix of the both of them. And I want to try and keep it all very watery. So I'm grabbing a little bit of yellow and just dropping pure yellow now. Somewhat pure. Then I'm grabbing some water and I'm doing more diluted wash over it. I don't want it to be too dark yet. This is just our under layer. Then I'll grab a little bit of pink. And what I'm trying to do here is create some variance and some inconsistency. I don't want it all to be just an underwash of the same exact color. So I'm going between all, I would kind of say all three colors, because once you mix the two colors, you get a third color. So I'm going between yellow and alizarin crimson and the peachy color we get in between them. And we're going to go over the whole petal. And the other thing you can do, like I said, you don't always have to grab paint every time. You can grab water sometimes. And that's going to help you to create just a really light version of whatever's already on your brush. So hopefully you can see that pretty well, how it's not all just one color. There's even some spots where I'm letting like a little bit of the paper, just the white paper, still kind of shine through. I'm not trying to fully cover it. Okay, so we're going to let that petal dry, and I'm just going to go clockwise. So we're going to do the same thing up here. Oh, actually, I'm glad I remembered this. I want you to just grab a little bit of blue, And while it's still wet, very, 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 very watery mix of blue. I'm using ultramarine blue here. I'm going to drop this blue right here. And I'm doing it now because I want it to diffuse really softly. And it's just easy to get that effect when you drop it in while the paint is still wet. So drop a little bit more up here. So I guess in those 3 spots, maybe a tiny little dash there. Dash there. So subtle. It's going to be very subtle too once it all dries. Okay, so next petal. Here we go. Doing the same thing. And again, I'm just kind of trying to mix up the colors. This petal, I think I'm going to lean a little bit more towards the pink side. And in general, I think I actually do want to lean more towards the pink than the yellow. But if you like the peach color a little bit more, or if you even like the yellow more, you can lean towards whichever side you're feeling right now. And I'm going to do the same thing I did here. So grab a little bit of that blue and we'll drop it in just a couple spots. I went a little bit heavier than I wanted to right there, so I will just grab my towel, lift it up just a little bit, and then add a little bit more water to it. Let's see what the water does with that. Okay, moving to this next petal. I'm not afraid of these colors actually just touching each other for right now. It's not too big a deal. So it's okay if the paint from one petal to the next touches into the next petal. We're going to differentiate the shadows between the petals a little bit later on, so we don't need to worry about that right now. And my suggestion here is really try to be mindful about not letting it get too dark too quickly. If you feel like you're dropping too much paint, if yours is looking darker than mine, just use your towel, paper towel here, and lift it up a little bit. As long as it's still wet, you should be able to lift up that paint pretty easily. Once it dries, that becomes a lot more difficult. Okay, we're gonna go to the petal just behind that one. And, oh, I forgot to drop in my blue moment in this one here. So I'm gonna do just a tiny bit right here. And I'm actually gonna pull this in even closer for you guys because I want you to really see the colors that I'm seeing in these petals. It's definitely not just pink, right? You see that there's yellow, there's kind of almost like a purpley blue, and there's peach and there's pink, and there's a lot of variety. So moving over to this petal here. So this one is actually going to be the darkest petal. So what I might even do is I'm just going to grab some purple right away. So I just grabbed a little bit of blue in my brush. It's mixing with the pink that I already have in my bristles, so it's creating a pretty purple mix here. And what I want you to think about is keeping the parts that curl inward. I want you to think about keeping those light, okay, for right now. So don't even worry about painting those at this moment. This one as well. I'm going to hold off. Grabbing a little bit of brush, or a little bit of water in my brush. Smoothing that out. I'm gonna take a quick drink of my coffee. I made my coffee this morning at 6:30, right when my kids woke up, and I have not had any time to drink it today. I keep it in one of these thermoses that keeps it warm, which is kind of a non-negotiable for a mom with young kids. I don't know why I would ever use a mug. I have to use one of these travel mugs or else it's gonna just constantly be getting cold. I was really sad. I took my son and my daughter to the park yesterday, and I had so many things in my arms that I asked my son if he could hold it's called a fellow mug, the travel mug. I asked my son if he could hold it while I was holding her and holding a bunch of other kid supplies. And he dropped it on the asphalt and it just got so like dinged up and dented. I was like, oh, dang. My mom, growing up, I remember her always saying, kind of like, I don't know, she would kind of just say it to herself. She would say, do you want nice things or do you want kids? And I always think about that, and it kind of makes me laugh because it's true. Nothing is precious when you have little kids. Like everything can get destroyed. So you can't be too precious about anything, I guess. Okay, so I just dropped a little bit more of that darker purple in some of those little spots kind of closer towards the center. Okay, and actually it's looking a little too purple. So what I'm going to do is grab a little bit more of that pink. I'm going to drop a little bit of pink there. We don't want to go too purple too quickly. So what I'm going to do is just lift a tiny bit of that out right there. That's perfect. Okay, so let's go to this next one here. We're going to do kind of a similar color. And like I said, I want to keep this part that's curving. I want to keep that white for now, and we'll go back and add some color to it later. I'm grabbing a little bit more of my peach. I'm actually going to drop more of the peach over here too. I think maybe this bottom petal, that's probably what it's missing. It's just a little bit of that peach color. So yellow is how we get that. Just grab yellow. I love it. There's so many colors in this flower. It's so pretty. It looks kind of unnatural at this moment. It looks like some sort of fish or something like that. So much fun. Okay, last petal. I'm going to go back to my peachy color over here. Lay that on there. Add some water. Use that water to keep moving that color, but a more diluted version of it. The water just lightens whatever's in your brush. So just grab water. Grab a little bit of paint, drop that in. Grab a little bit of water, smooth that out. I'm going to go ahead and let these two petals bleed together a little bit. If they want to touch into each other, that's fine. And I'll grab a little bit of that blue color and I'll drop it right here. And I'll drop it right there. Okay, first thoughts here. My painting is going to look pretty different than the one I did last night. I feel like every time I paint it just looks a little bit different. And that is what happens when you paint live. You know, you never know exactly how it's going to turn out because watercolor has a mind of its own. You don't always grab the exact same amount of paint every time. Sometimes the mixture of colors is different, but I think it's still going to turn out really cool. I'm excited. Smooth that out a little. Also, let me know, would any of you guys be interested in Zoom classes instead of YouTube classes? I like YouTube because it's super easy. One thing that's cool about Zoom is that when I used to do the Michael's classes, it was really fun to be able to see everybody's faces. But yeah, YouTube is lower tech, which I do. I like to keep things simple. But if anybody would be interested in Zoom, I wonder if there could be a possibility of doing that in the future. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the center. I'm going to switch to my small brush here. And I'm going to grab some sap green, just pure sap green. So what I'm going to do is we're going to try and give a little more definition to the very center, the pistil of this poppy here. So we're going to go around it. And just notice how I'm kind of not necessarily going around in a circle. My technique here is to kind of move around and paint some dashes. Kind of radiating out of the center. Some spots I'm going to draw some lines that are reaching outward. Okay, I'm going to use one of my larger brushes. I'm wetting it, cleaning it off. And I'm going to use that damp brush to just smooth out some of that green. Feather it out towards the big ring. And so we're just kind of trying to create some smooth, soft gradients here. But I don't want to lose the definition of the green I just dropped. So kind of trying to meet in the middle, where there's some spots that are a little bit more sharp, and then some spots where we're trying to create it a little bit more soft, a little more of a gradient. Okay? And something else I'm going to do here. I'm going to grab this, I'm going to keep calling it my olive oil color here. And I want you to just drop in some dashes of this color. Kind of in the middle of this white area. And then you can add some water to your brush. Just keep on smoothing it outward. Out towards the edge of that large circle. Okay. Hopefully you're liking how yours is looking. Oh, almost dropped my brush on my painting. Okay, I'm going to clean off my large size 6 brush. And so your bottom petals are probably mostly dry. Mine are not fully dry, but they are mostly dry. I'm going to go back to my peachy pink mixture. And I'm going to drop in this color. To my petals right here, to where they're curling up. Same thing over here on this very bottom petal. So something I want to think about is that I do want the part, like, so the very bottom edge of those petals where they start curling up, we do want that color to be just a tiny bit darker. So it kind of has the impression that there's like a little bit of shadow and we're seeing more light just at the very, very edge. Okay. Clean my brush off, and then what we're going to do now, I would call that the underwash of my painting. And now I'm at the phase where I want to start building some depth and just creating a little bit more form and a little bit more definition for my petals. So we're going to start back at this petal over here. And what I'll do is go back to my alizarin crimson and peach. So mix the yellow and the alizarin crimson. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to grab a little bit of blue. Just a little bit. And just bringing a little bit of blue to this mix, what it's doing is you are adding blue to essentially orange, and those are opposite colors. So what's going to happen is when you add just a touch of that blue, it is going to take down the intensity of the peach. So it's going to become like a little bit more, I would say just a little bit less intense. It's a little bit less saturated. And I think this is how we're going to bring just a little bit more of like a muted feel to this. And if you don't want to add the blue, you don't have to. I think it adds a lot of depth. When you have pure pigments, when you have those bright pinks and purples and yellows, but then you also have moments that are less intense, I think it just adds a lot of interest to your painting. So don't be afraid of, quote, muddy colors. People talk about muddy colors with a lot of fear, but I'm not super afraid of muddy colors because I think as long as the whole thing isn't desaturated, I think muddy colors have a place. So here's my slightly muddy pink color. And what I'm doing up here is I'm trying to just add these little dashes and I also don't want to go too dark, okay? And I don't also want to just keep dropping the same color over and over. So all of my little dashes, I'll do a few dashes and then I kind of try and change it up in some small way. So I'll grab a little bit of water that time on my brush and I'll blot it, and then I'll maybe reach over towards the blue down here and I'll use some water, smooth that out. Like I told you, I'm referencing my painting, 2 paintings actually. I have the original I did and then the one I did last night, and this one is probably going to look quite different from both of those, or at least somewhat different. And the effect of, what I found when I was painting it originally and last night is this painting is the effect of lots of layers. And so, whenever you're painting in lots of layers, you're never going to do the exact same thing the same way every time. So here's some more of this peach color. We'll layer it in over here. Grab some water in my brush. Dilute that pink and smooth out some of those details here. I'll reach over here to my light bluish purple mix. And just let those pencil markings there be a guide of some of the movements you want to create. Some spots where you maybe want to just drop in a dab of some extra dark color. I'm going to grab a little bit more blue over here in my palette. I'm loving what's happening over here with the sunlight on my palette. So pretty. I thought it was going to be a real cloudy day, but it's turning around now that I don't see a cloud in the sky. Okay, I'm dropping a little bit more of this blue purple up there. That felt a little dark, so I'll lift that up. I'm going to clean my brush a little bit and just use that slightly damp brush to smooth out some details. You can also just switch between 2 brushes and have one designated for just being totally clean. Okay, so we're gonna let that dry, come back, we got more details to add later, but let's keep on moving. So we'll go to our second one here. Reaching into this peachy color here, I'm gonna grab a tiny bit more blue. Like I said, I want more of that slightly more desaturated purpley pink color. A little bit too much paint here, so I'm just blotting it on my paper towel. And you can think about just kind of following those pencil markings that we have here. I'm going to wet my brush and then just add a slightly more desaturated version of that color. I also want to reach back over towards the purplish blue. Okay, I'm gonna let that one dry and then go over to this one here. So I'm gonna grab some of our peachy color here. And I am going to think about maybe starting to create a little bit of shadow from one petal to the next. Grab a little bit of blue as well. That purplish blue is going to be what we use for our shadows in this painting. Sometimes we also just maybe want to use a darker version of this peach color for a shadow as well. So right here it's kind of more of like the light peach color as a shadow, and then as we move down here towards the stamen, I'm leaning more into that purple color to help me really get that dramatic, darker impact. And like I said, we're trying to just keep a lot of variation. We do want to have that crinkly, wrinkled effect. So keep on changing the color. Keep on changing your mark application. So sometimes we're doing lines, sometimes we do just these little dashes, okay? And that's going to help to get that kind of crinkled look, which we love. I'm going to use a wet version of that yellow, smooth it out a little bit. Switch to my clean brush. And I can just move that color wherever I want. Okay, so let's go down to this this petal down here that I was saying is kind of the darker of all of them. And I will grab this alizarin crimson with a tiny bit of blue in it. And we are starting to create some serious depth here. Here I will think about just kind of following those pencil markings. Over here, drop a little bit extra dark paint where these two petals overlap each other. Using a little bit of that damp pink color, just adding a little bit of water to my brush. And smoothing that out. I'm going to go ahead and bring it all the way up to the edge of this petal where it's curling. I feel like this is dried a little bit funny. Just going to smooth that paint color out a tiny bit. I'm going to also drop just a tiny bit of this darker pink here on the edge of this petal where it's folding. Okay, it's feeling good. Okay, so got 2 more petals left here, and then we're going to go back to the center and add some more details there. So adding that same darker color, kind of right here where there's a shadow in between these 2 petals, and then I'm following the lines, the pencil lines that I have here. Okay, so then I'm switching to my clean brush, then I'll smooth that color out. Okay, and then our last one. Adding a little bit more pink to my mix here. Reaching over into the blue a little bit more. Then I'm going to use my clean brush. And then using water to smooth out what I just put down. Okay, I'm just going to look at it for 1 minute here. See if there's anything I want to add while the paint is still wet in a few spots. I would say I'll add a tiny bit of this purpley blue color right in there. Tiny bit more over here where we want it to be really dark. Tiny bit here, but not too much. Okay. Oh my goodness, I love this flower. I love poppies. I love painting. It's just so fun. So satisfying to create this kind of painting. There's a lot of depth to it, isn't it? Okay, so we're gonna go back to the center and we're gonna switch to a small brush again. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab some ultramarine blue, super, super dark. Like I am just rubbing this brush in this dark color. Let me turn up my brightness here a little bit. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to drop this super dark blue, not everywhere, but just in a few spots to just add a little bit more oomph. Kind of doing the same technique we did, so just sort of these dashes, kind of radiating outwards. And then I'm going to just mix a tiny bit of blue with a tiny bit of green. You can even just use blue here if you want to, but just take that blue-green. And we are going to just add these little dashes to that very center area. Adding just a few more little lines in a few places here. The center stamen pistil area, I'm not making this part like photorealistic detailed by any means. In my paintings, I generally like for them to have like the impression of life, but I don't necessarily like to make things look like, oh, that could be a photo. And I know I've talked about that quite a bit in different tutorials, but definitely not my goal for this one. So we're going to switch over to our larger brush. And what I'll do is I'm just going to go back to my olive oil color. And I want you to reach into Indian yellow if you have it. If you don't have Indian yellow, just use a warmer yellow than the yellow you've been using. Something that has a little bit more orange or a little bit more red to it. You could even just mix a little bit of red with your yellow and you're going to get the same effect. There's so many ways to get to the color you want. Okay, and then what we're going to do is just drop in dashes for this, the stamen. Keep them sparse for now. Let's do a pass where we just keep them light, not too dense, not too dark. And then in some spots, if you made it too dark, just grab a little bit of that darker yellow and let's disperse it around. See what I mean? And then I want to think. I'm dipping my brush in water, the same brush. So now I'm getting a more light diluted yellow. And I'm just going to draw these little lines radiating towards the center. Feeling good. Okay, I'll let that dry. We're going to come back to that. We got one more layer of details for this center area. Okay, so let's go back. We're going to do our final details for our petals. We could stop here. I think it's feeling really good. But what I want to do is I really want to add, I want there to be some really nice differentiation from petal to petal. So I think a few spots, especially over here, I want to see a little bit more definition. I also want to see maybe just some more obvious lines. So I'm not necessarily trying to go much darker at this point. I like the value that we're at. The value we're at is kind of where I want it to stay, but I do want to see more detail, if that makes sense. So I will grab just a little bit of this darker color though, a little bit of that purple as well. So grab a little bit of the blue purple, mix it in with your pink. I know I'm doing a lot of color mixing today. I hope that hasn't overwhelmed anybody. Lots of changing, right? There's just a lot of one color to the next color to the next color. So I'm just dropping in that color using my size 6 brush. Between these two petals, I want to see just a little bit of that darker color. I'm going to leave it be for a second, and then I'm going to also drop that color, grabbing a little bit more of the purple right here. So I'm painting on the same petal. I'm also just going to go ahead and I'll actually blot my brush in the water and blot it on a towel so it's not too watery. And then I'm just going to use this slightly more diluted version of my purple color. And what I want to do is, like I said, I want more details. I want more of those lines, those crinkly, ruffly, long lines. I even want to see a little bit more up here. So do these little dashes right here where this petal is curling inward. You could add a little bit more shading just underneath there. And you can keep switching it up. You should keep switching it up. I'm just using the same color. But you can reach over more towards the yellow. And then I'm going to switch to my clean, damp brush and smooth those details without getting rid of them. When your brush is just damp, it's going to be a very soft effect. If your brush is sopping with water, it's going to be a little bit more dramatic. And this all takes a lot of practice, a lot of familiarity with the feel of how much paint is, or how much water is in your brush. I've mentioned it before, but the less water you have in your brush, the more control you have. And also the smaller brush you have, the more control you have. So the larger brush you have and the more water, the less control you're going to feel like you have. So when I first started, I probably erred on the side of brushes that were too small and not using very much water because I wanted to feel like I had control of what I was doing. Because whenever I would use a large brush, I noticed it made me feel like I couldn't control the painting, I couldn't control how it turned out. But the more you practice, the more comfortable you are, the more you kind of find your sweet spot. And you find what really works for you, because it really is kind of different for everybody. I think nowadays I probably often err on the side of using brushes that are too large, but I like the way it feels. So anyways, okay, let's go to the next petal. This one is feeling really good. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to add. Actually, I will add one last thing. Just a tiny bit more blue right there. Then I'll use my other brush, damp brush, and just smooth that out. Okay, next petal. We're going to add some more details here as well. Just a little bit. The pencil markings are a nice reference for sure. You can just kind of follow those pencil markings to add a little bit of extra detail. Easy. That petal feels pretty nice. Okay, let's go over to this one over here. So the third petal over. I'll add just a little bit here. And as I'm doing this, I'm really realizing it doesn't need a whole lot. Sometimes less is more, but really only you are able to make that decision on what's good enough, when is done. It's a hard question to answer sometimes. My done is usually a lot. How do I say it? I feel like for me, done, it takes a long time. I tend to I feel like I err on the side of overworking sometimes, but I like how it looks, so it's not overdone for me, because I like paintings to feel like they have a lot of detail. So I'm grabbing just some of that alizarin crimson, maybe a little bit more blue. Let's add some real drama over here to this petal. Following my pencil markings from earlier. And then I'll switch over to my clean damp brush and then smooth out those details. Keeping everything soft, feathery. Trying not to cover everything though, because there's some light moments in this petal that I don't want to make it like super dark. So if you go too dark at all, you just lift it out. Kind of look at it as a whole too. You want to make sure that it still feels cohesive with the other petals, even though it is darker. Okay, so next one, I'm going to use that same color. So I have kind of a pink with yellow and a little bit of blue. Desaturated pink is what I'm calling it. Maybe a dusty rose color. So I got that from using my peach color with a little bit of blue. Cleaning off this second brush I have and then smoothing out those paint markings to keep it all nice and soft. We'll add a little bit to the back side of this petal as well. Kind of just moving with the shape of it. So kind of following this curving line right there. That's the shape of the paint lines I'm adding to it. A little bit more here at the very bottom. Another detail I want to add is maybe just adding a little bit of darkness right there. And then I'll smooth that out. So I dropped in that bluish pink color, mostly blue, and then smooth it out. If you go a little too dark, just lift it up. squinting at it. I'm just looking at it all as a whole. I want to say maybe a little bit extra depth right there, and then I'll use my other clean brush to smooth it out. These final details really just make a huge difference. Also, I have not been keeping up with the chat. I feel like my phone is kind of blocking my computer, so I have to like look over. Dee said she would love Zoom. Sam says she's loving YouTube. Hello from Brazil, Nide. I'm not sure if I said that right, but good to see you today. All right, guys, we got one petal left. Home stretch. This is actually the least detailed petal of all of them too. So, also, do you guys have a favorite petal? I feel like I always have a favorite petal whenever I work on a flower like this. I like this one, and I think I like this one. I always like the ones that have the most drama. I like this one too. I always love the ones that curve. The ones that have the folds and the ruffles. I feel like they always just bring the most character. I'm going to add a little bit more yellow to this one. I'm actually just putting pretty much just straight yellow on top of that one. I felt like I did too much just pink lines right there and made it feel uninteresting and kind of flat when I just add just a bunch of pink to it. So I just kind of countered that by adding some yellow to it. Okay, so let me think if there's anywhere else I want to add some shading. I think this spot could use a little bit more. I'm squinting at it as a whole, just looking at all of it at once. When I squint, I'm able to see all the details. It helps me. Adding a few more veins, the crinkly lines here. A few more lines here. Can add a little bit more right there. Okay, so let's go back to the very center. I'm gonna let my petals dry off. Okay, so our last detail, actually I'll keep using my size 6 brush, so make sure you have a clean brush here. And then I want you to grab some Indian yellow. And I'm just gonna mix it right here, right on top of the other yellow mix I have here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to just find some moments to drop the yellow on top of the yellow that's already there. Because I like the white parts. I don't want to lose any of my lightness, like the white behind there. So I'm just going to find some moments to layer it on, mostly trying to stay on the other dashes I already have. Another thing is I don't want you to make it a perfect circle. If you're following the sketch, it probably won't be. We want it to feel perfectly imperfect. Make some of your dashes go this way and that way. Just a little bit inconsistent. Okay, I'm going to grab a little bit of blue. And I'm going to add a little bit of blue to my yellow, just a tiny bit. And I'm going to grab a tiny bit of red as well. I'm kind of trying to get to a nice dark brown color. If you have brown, you can just grab brown. But I told you what colors I was going to use, and so it's a good challenge for me to stick with those colors and show you how I would mix to get to brown. So I'm going to use that mix of a little bit of red, a little bit of blue, a lot of yellow. And now I have this deeper kind of brown color to use. I'm not using it as much as the yellow, but just in a few places. All right, and then I'm going to clean my brush off, mostly. And then I'm going to just pull towards the center again, using just the tip of my brush here. So I'm kind of trying to pull that color downward and create these lines reaching towards the center. So fun. I'm going to grab a little bit more of that sap green, just a tiny, tiny bit. I'm going to drop sap green here in the spots that I just wet with my brush. Just a tiny bit. Okay. Let all that dry. Okay. If I wanted to do just a couple final teeny details, I would add just a tiny bit more of alizarin crimson. Just a few places, because I love adding just a hint of alizarin crimson at the very end. Maybe a tiny bit extra right there. I love it. Adding that like red. It's like adding like hot sauce to a delicious meal. Like it didn't need it, but it's just like, ooh, that little bit of spice goes a long way. Okay, then I'm going to use my other brush here, or whatever brush, clean brush, and then just smooth it out just a tiny bit. I hope you guys enjoyed today's tutorial. I hope you enjoyed me kind of indulging my desire to overwork things a little bit. I don't know if, I don't think it's overworked. It's just got a lot of details, and we did almost a full hour today. Awesome. On one flower, no leaves or anything, just one flower. That's amazing. I hope that you, if you painted along with me today, I hope you love how your flower turned out. If you want to share it on social media, I would love to see it. Always makes me so happy. And yeah, again, just a reminder, be sure to get on my wait list for Bloom Watercolor Club. I'm sure most of you guys are already inside, but if you're not, be sure to get on the wait list, and maybe I'll see you inside on January 8th. So you guys have a wonderful day. Thank you so much. I'll see you again soon.